it's an only child. It's in my reputation, something more than what I know it serves me right, but I can't sleep.
Hey everybody, how you doing tonight? Always catch me off guard. All right, this is Talk, and we got about 55 minutes of a show where you can also call in at any time, ask my guest a question. And tonight, I'm happy and privileged to have on here Scott Wilson, who is the president of the CCDL, Connecticut Citizens Defense League. And if you want the Second Amendment to stay the way it is, you want to know about guns in all aspects, this is the man to call and ask. Scott, how are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
I really appreciate you coming on the show. I really do.
It's great to be here. I'm becoming familiar in this studio.
Yes, you are. Pretty soon you're going to have your own show, which might not be a bad idea. So there's all kinds of stuff I want to talk about. I want to give you more time to touch on stuff that's very important, because everything that I've been reading that you do and your organization does, to me, is very important to people, not only in this state but in this country. I mean, you can't be taking away something that's going to protect you. I mean, to have somebody come along and say, you can't have a gun, and you live in some place where you need one just to protect yourself and your family, it's just, it doesn't fit our country. I mean, our country was never like that in the beginning. You had to have something to protect yourself. So let's start out with today. There was a very important decision made in Maryland. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. If I could, I'd just like to, I know some people watch different shows out there, just a little bit about our organization, if that's okay.
Okay, no, fine,
okay.
Whatever.
This Connecticut Citizens Defense League formed in February of 2009. That was when we held our first get-together dinner from people who met on we all met on a gun forum. And at that time, there was not a lot being done with respect to protecting our rights here in Connecticut. So we got together and had dinner, and there were some that just wanted to show up for the dinner. They didn't really want to go on to any future endeavors to try to create something. But that night, our half of the table, it was a very long table with about 20 people, I said, I think we should do something. I really think we should start this. And a couple of the people that were at the table, a couple of really good people that were sitting at the table, looked at me, and one in particular said, "Yeah, are you serious?" And I said, "Yes." I said, "I think we can do it." And I said, I think I can get us pointed in the right direction. And his ears perked up, and he got a little smile on his face. And within a matter of a few days, I was led to try to keep us all together and direct things in the way to build the organization. I'm very glad I did. I'm very proud of what we have done. And aside from myself, there are many, many hardworking individuals that do so much, either directly in front of other people or behind the scenes to help the organization grow. There's a strong feeling of a bond and commitment to work with each other to protect our rights. So it's really neat. It's really, really neat, Dennis.
All right, well, we'll wait on what I first said, because now you got me very interested.
Okay, I'm sorry about that.
Oh, no, that's okay. That's okay, because I know that was a very important decision, and I wanted to make sure I didn't forget to bring it up.
We will not forget the decision.
Now, what got you started in all this? I mean, what got you started?
Well, I didn't grow up in, some gun household. I grew up with some 3 brothers and a sister, and a mother that struggled to put food on our table. We grew up right here in New London. Well, we're in Waterford, but grew up in New London. And my father divorced my mother when I was 2, so I didn't really have a tremendous father influence around. I had a couple older brothers, 3 older brothers, but 2 that were considerably older than me that sort of were male figures. Back in those days, if men carried guns or owned guns more so than women typically in society back then.
And boy, has that changed.
And it's changing a lot, and we can talk about that at some point during the show here tonight.
Yeah.
So I really didn't have a lot of exposure. I think the only time I ever really was around them when I was in the Boy Scouts. I went to camp and I shot some .22 rifles, and I thought it was cool, but it didn't really have that much of a lasting impact on me in any way, shape, or form. I made the statement here before when I was, not to get too lost in this, I was actually shot accidentally
I know,
when I was
you
a kid.
blew my mind when you told me that.
Yeah, and it was a near life-ending experience for me. And a relative had a gun, and he pointed it at me and didn't know it was loaded or whatever. He pulled the trigger. He didn't have any safety or training education with firearms either, and from that point, I didn't really care about firearms. I went about growing up from my adolescence into just really going into my 20s, and then eventually one day I started to look at some of the things that were going on with terrorism and crime increasing, and the shrinking world of news with the internet and everything sort of put things in perspective about the fact that there could be a crazy person somewhere that could end your life, the life of a loved one or something. So I went and applied for a pistol permit. I took a safety course, and I went through the class and applied for the permit, got the permit. A coworker of mine did the same thing right on my heels. And that was it, really. So I became involved with, learning about guns and reading about guns, and still, even for a couple of years or so, I didn't really pay attention to the rights end of it so much. But then the Heller decision came up, which was a big landmark lawsuit that was Dick Heller versus D.C. And it was called into question whether or not individuals, as citizens of this country, individually have a right to own guns. Even though it says so in our Constitution, in the Second Amendment, there was still a question whether or not that it applied to the militia or people, and what types of guns people could own. And the question that he had was whether or not he could have the right to own a gun in his home, just in his home in Washington, D.C., because there was a total ban on firearms at the time in D.C. So he won the case, and then there was a follow-up case, and that's when I really started to pay attention to things, looking at Connecticut laws. And I figured that things weren't so bad when we started the organization, but I could tell things were going in a negative direction, and that's why we started the organization.
And that you started the organization before Malloy went crazy with these new gun laws?
We started the organization before Malloy was actually elected.
Oh, okay.
So
how strong are you now? How many members?
we have nearing 22,000 members now across the state. Yeah, and we're growing every day. A lot of our members sign up and become members. A lot of them just want to really be kept up on the news. A lot of our members are hands-on and are regulars at our meetings. We have monthly meetings where several hundred people will show up.
And where's that at?
That's at the Elks Lodge in Middletown, second Tuesday every month. We have usually we have a lot of guests. We have
What time is on a meeting?
7 p.m. 7
Okay.
p.m. to 9 p.m. So we're bringing a lot of guests right now. We're coming up on elections for 2016, and there's a lot
But
of.
I remember reading something about your organization doesn't actually represent or any particular politician. I mean, you don't go looking for it. You just inform people of which ones are pro-gun and which ones are against guns, or something along that line. Is that right?
Well, we don't typically seek out candidates that are running for office, but our ears are always open. So
Yeah.
if there are pro-2A candidates from whichever party, they are always welcome to reach out to us, and we will do what we can to help them by having some of our members participate in their campaigns as individuals.
Are you married?
I am, yes.
So, were you married at the time you decided to get all involved in all this stuff? And
I was not.
So your wife must be okay with the whole gun thing then. Is she a member?
She is not a member. She's not a member. She is somebody who supports wholly what I do, but
that's
she
good.
is. She's not really, a person that is big vested into the whole interest of the Second Amendment and guns and things of that nature. She's glad that I have own them, and she likes it if we're out on the town somewhere that the knowledge that I'm going to be carrying a firearm, because crime can happen anywhere, and she she's well aware of that. In fact, I've probably made her too aware of some of the the crimes.
But she has no desire to learn how to use a gun?
No. She came with me one time and
Oh.
she learned how to shoot. But we were actually friends before we actually used to work with each other years ago at the place I still work. She left the company and we ended up getting together and going out on a date years later after she left. And
But the reason I had asked is because I talk with friends at work, and some of them are gun owners, and they're always telling me how the wife doesn't like to have one in the house, but yet they want some kind of protection. And a couple of them tell me how their wives learn how to use a gun, especially since they're working nights, stuff like that. So I'm always curious about how women react to the fact of having a gun in the house. It seems like most women don't like it, although that's probably changing tremendously.
It's changing a lot. It actually is. It's changing a lot. In fact, women are the largest increasing demographic of gun enthusiasts that are out there. We get, myself and some of the other executives get alerts when our new member joins up and they enter their information into our database. And you would be surprised, if not stunned, at the ratio of women that join our organization. You'd be surprised at how many women come to our meetings and help out, women on our executive committee, women that volunteer for our events, because we have a number of events, fundraising events, poker runs, because it's been a costly challenge. We've been suing the state of Connecticut.
Because I heard you mention something earlier with Paul Formica about permits. I don't know, was it permits? That slipped my mind. I'm old. Things go in and out. But, all righty. So I lost that train.
Well, permits. Women are applying for permits at a high rate right now.
Well, I know what I was going to say. When you were saying about it being a costly adventure, and I heard you talking about lawyers now. You guys must have a rack of lawyers, right?
Well, I mean, we have different lawyers for different functions. We have a general counsel who serves our organization. He is Craig Fishbein, and he is our perpetual pro bono attorney. He has never submitted a bill to us. Why, I don't know. But for some reason, he loves us.
In you.
Right, he believes in us and appreciates what we do, and he does an awful lot himself. He's also, aside from being our general counsel, he's a member of the Board of Firearms Permit Examiners, which is the entity that helps make sure people, if they are have their permit revoked or if they are denied a permit by an issuing authority, they have a place to go where they can have a hearing in front of this board, and the board will rule one way or the other, whether or not they should have it revoked or denied or reinstated or issued.
Now, what does it cost to become a member?
Of our organization?
Yeah.
Our organization is free to join.
Oh.
Yes, a lot of our members join for free, and then they contribute. We have donate links and PayPal links, and people contribute along those lines. And we have merchandise that we sell, shirts, hats, and car stickers, window decals that are all over the state of Connecticut. We ship hundreds of those out every week, so those are available on our website to order as well.
Man, it seems like your organization is growing so fast. I mean, how do you keep up?
We are, and a lot of people thought it was crazy when we incorporated to try to do things on a volunteer basis and a sort of like an honor system for members that use our services, because we have a lot of services that we provide. A lot of information, a lot of resources, a lot of statistical information. We provide a lot of updates with legislation that's coming down the pipe, and to make sure people are informed with what and how that information will affect them if it's passed, if it's a bill and it becomes a law. So we want to make sure people are well informed what the state of Connecticut is up to.
So I want to ask you at least one or two questions before we get into some of the stuff here. Is how hard is it to get a permit? I mean, what's the way it goes to get a permit?
Yeah, actually, that was a question that was asked to me the last time I was in this studio, and I'll give you the same answer. It depends on what town you live in. Connecticut has a two-step process for obtaining a permit to carry firearms, a permanent Connecticut-issued permit to carry firearms. And the first is you have to apply to your local issuing authority, be it the town you live in, through the police chief or the first selectman, or some towns use resident state troopers, whoever is deemed your issuing authority for the town you live in is the person you need to apply to. But before you can apply, you need to have proof that you've taken a Connecticut, what's recognized by the state of Connecticut as an NRA basic safety course or some other course, I think there's maybe one other course that's suited for to accompany your application. So you have to apply with the having taken the safety course. Then there's fingerprints that are involved, and then there's background check fees that go on. And it typically, state statutes 2938 indicate that that the issuing authority has 8 weeks to either issue your permit or deny your permit to carry firearms. And you need that permit in order to be able to purchase a handgun in the state of Connecticut. So that's a very important thing that you need. You can't just buy a handgun without one of these pistol permits, we call them.
So there's no way you can have a gun in your house without a permit.
You can have a gun in your house without a permit.
See, I got in this argument.
How
do you get it from point A to point B?
Well, there's exceptions for people who move from other states is your biggest exception. So say you move from South Carolina to Connecticut. You're allowed to transfer the guns if you're moving into the state of Connecticut. Once it's here, it's in your house. It's not supposed to leave your house for any reason, with exception to a federally licensed dealer if you're going to sell it, or to another person that is able to purchase it, but typically that's a federally licensed dealer. Repair work, or to, say, your job. If you own property where you're allowed to have it, it's your property, it's your business, you can bring it to your job. But again, it can't go outside, it can't step off the property with the gun. And those are very few exceptions. So really, when you transfer those guns from your house to your job, you can't have it on your person loaded, you can't have it in your car loaded. The ammunition has to be separate from the gun, and the gun has to be locked and inaccessible to passengers in the motor vehicle. So
that's whether you have a permit or not?
No, that's if you don't have a
Okay.
permit. So you can bring it, like I said, you can bring it from your house to your job and back into the gun shop, or you can't even bring it to a range to shoot. You have to have it in one of those locations.
Okay.
So that's why a permit to carry, once you have a permit to carry a gun, you can carry it on your person in whatever manner you're comfortable with. But we implore that people that do own and carry firearms carry in a responsible fashion.
Now, you always hear about, someone that has a gun, they do something stupid with it, and they say, well, they were mentally not right or whatever. When they do a background check, are they checking into that somehow to see if, you're medically okay to have a gun?
Well, they're checking what's been reported. They can only check into how deep things have been reported. The police are allowed to conduct an investigation into an applicant's history during the application process, but they're only allowed to use specific tools that are geared for them to be able to use. The NICS history, the criminal background, if there's a history, somebody had been adjudicated mentally deficient, and they're prohibited either in the state of Connecticut or federally in particular from owning a gun or being able to possess a gun, they're obviously not going to get a permit. There's long arm permits too for rifles now, since the law changed in 2013. It's really a tangled mess. It's a tangled mess, and it takes time for somebody that is interested in firearms and wants to become a gun owner to sift through it. But that's why we're here as an organization. You can go to our website and learn a lot, if not all, of this stuff.
Now, if you're in a situation where someone's breaking into your home, they get inside your house, and you feel threatened, you're a gun owner, licensed gun owner, and unfortunately, you have to take them out to protect you and your family. Now, after that point, isn't there, at least in the state of Connecticut, isn't there a lot of stuff you got to go through? I mean, can you be charged?
You can be charged if the district attorney's office feels that you weren't threatened in some manner or way, shape, or form with egregious bodily harm or death. If you are not faced with the situation that you can substantiate, you could face charges. And there's a lot of fear about that because we don't have strong castle doctrine laws in the state of Connecticut, which, my home is my castle. Some states have stellar castle doctrine laws. Some states have stand your ground laws, which was misconstrued as some shoot me first or shoot, licensed to legally murder somebody laws during the I forgot his name, Zimmerman trial, which they didn't, the stand your ground defense didn't even apply in his case, but they kept bringing it up every day. So basically in Connecticut, the big problem we have is if you are in a situation where you use a gun to defend yourself, be quiet, get a lawyer, and it is always possible, because we don't have good castle doctrine laws, that if the person survives or a family member of the person that's breaking your house, they can technically take you to court and sue you.
See, that to me is so crazy. Who knows what's going on in that house in a situation like that? I mean, the people that are in there are only ones know. And I mean, it's not written somewhere where there's a list of levels of how fear or how afraid you are for your family to protect them. I mean, you're doing what you feel is the right thing to do, to keep your family and yourself safe. And yet, this state seems to just, I don't know.
Well, it's not just this state; it's a number of states. But and that's why we suggest have a lawyer that's reputable and with Second Amendment.
And they could come to your organization for a lawyer for something like that.
Well, yes, we have reference links to Second Amendment attorneys on our website. But you really need to be careful. And if you say something that can implicate yourself, then there's no taking it back. There's good police out there who understand that these situations do happen, but they're also doing their duty too. And if you say something that becomes a matter of record, you make a statement, and it's something that's not favorable to you being able to protect with the statement that you're protecting your life and defending your life, it can end up hurting you. So that's why it's a good idea to at least have a general idea who attorneys are, know your rights, know all your rights.
Because I've always thought, first of all, when you're going to go to school for learning how, before you have to get your permit or after your permit, having a gun and shooting it is one thing, but do they teach you or talk to you at all about the possibility of what happens if you ever have to use it against somebody? I mean, because I don't know if a lot of people that get a gun really in the back of their head realize, I might have to use this thing in a self-defense way.
Right. Well, they don't. They typically, when you go to a safety course in Connecticut, it's to make sure that you understand what can happen. It's to help the person avoid accidental, or the preferred terminology nowadays is negligent discharges, so you don't shoot somebody accidentally, and to make sure that your firearms are safe and that you're not going to lose control of your firearm. Different types of weapons. Those are the types of things that are typically taught in an NRA basic pistol safety course here in Connecticut. After that, I think that, I don't know if they still do it, but the Department of Emergency Services and Public Protections, the Special Licensing and Fire Unit, who actually issues you your permanent state permit, they have a pamphlet that they hand out which has the laws concerning the carrying of firearms in the state of Connecticut. And there's so many things. Now we have magazine capacity issues where if you have a permit to carry, you are not allowed to carry more than 10 rounds in a magazine when you're going around in public in a magazine. You can have one round in the chamber, 10 rounds in a magazine.
Can you carry an extra magazine?
You can. Yes, you can.
So if you're in a situation where unfortunately people are shooting at each other like crazy and you're defending yourself and you run out of 10 shots, you can reload?
If you can reload amid all that kind of chaos, typically in those situations, most gunfights don't go like that. I mean, if a lot of
That's
the
probably a lot of
TV,
TV.
a lot of the right,
Yeah.
the protracted gunfights where everybody's shooting behind cars or from buildings and chases and all that stuff. But typically, your typical gunfight will be over in probably 2 or 3 shots. But that's there's no rule that it has to be that way. So you don't know if you're. Take for instance, what happened in New London here several years ago with the young man who was walking home from his job was jumped by 6 people. Had he been carrying Matthew Chu, had he been carrying that night a gun, he would have probably have needed multiple rounds to protect himself or anybody else. Just maybe not necessarily.
Or one and
because
scared
sometimes
them off.
sometimes if you're walking home alone at night, you don't know if there's going to be 2, 3, or 4 individuals that may come after you, and that's an issue too, because it's not like TV. Not one round, one bullet is going to stop a perpetrator from coming after you. A lot of perpetrators are on drugs. A lot of people who are shot don't even know they're shot until later. People run away. People come after you. They can do all kinds of things. It's crazy.
Now, one more thing. We've had mass shootings. We had one here in Connecticut, probably more than one. So when you go into a course, is there a course somewhere that can teach you in the circumstances, if you're, say, at the workplace and somebody starts shooting, what to do? And especially if you have a permit to carry and you're carrying at that time. I mean, that's a tough, I can't even imagine that, because so you must go into some kind of form of, I don't know if it's shock or whatever, but all of a sudden, do they teach you how to react to it?
Oh yes, absolutely. And of course, I mean, if you're going to a training class, you already got a pretty good idea what's going to happen. So that's a simulation, and there's no replacement for actually going through a situation where you have people coming after you or intent to hurt you or your family. But you have there's Academy in Salem, Connecticut. They have great IDP training that goes on there where you're shooting around corners and things, but it's a little limited because the direction of the range is all in one direction downrange. But there's a place in Southington called King 33, and it's run by a former Green Beret, and he has an actual it's an old airport hangar. It's a 360-degree shoot house where they actually shoot from moving cars inside the building, where the car stops, people get out, shoot in every direction, they have different exercises where you're on your couch, people break through your door, people coming through windows. They have all kinds of different things. It's really quite the operation. And if there are enthusiasts out there or people who want to be better with their guns, that's the place to go.
I would think something like that should be something everybody should go to. I mean, you get a gun, you get a permit, you got it in your house, but you never really know how you're going to react in that situation.
Right.
At least this way, you have a kind of an idea of what to do.
Right.
Once you get over the initial shock of, hey, this is really happening.
Right, and a lot of it is, I mean, I think a lot of people that actually do go through it, because this is something that the media never talks about. We hear all about all the mass shootings where people die, but the media, for the most part, never really touch on, and if they do touch on them, they don't stay on the front pages or the headlines of the media very long. The amount of actual self-defense shootings that occur on a daily basis. The people in their home, somebody come through the door and they've got kids in the house. The situations where people are carjacked. I'll use, just to step out of Connecticut for a minute, I'll use Detroit for a minute, because here we have a major low-income city that's high in crime, urban decay. Things are not good these days in the city of Detroit. But you do, however, have something there that's pretty interesting. You have a pro-gun mayor, relatively, a very pro-gun police chief, and you have a large sect of urban popularity who know that the cops are not going to be there when they're needed, and the ones that are not prohibited from possessing guns, you've got two groups of people. You're either able to carry a gun legally, or you're the criminal on the other side of the gun that carries the gun anyways. And there are self-defense shootings daily in the city of Detroit. It's just from home invasions that are stopped, carjackings that are stopped, store robberies where the criminals are shot, gas pump robbery type things. It's pretty amazing.
I would think a place like that, there's probably more criminals with guns than there are honest people with guns.
There probably are, but however, there's such a large segment of law-abiding citizens, peaceful citizens out there that are licensed to carry. It's really incredible. I have a pretty good internet relationship with I consider him a friend, for one of the trainers that are out there in Michigan. He's pretty known throughout the country, and he is just pumping out students with carry permits on a regular basis.
Are there other organizations like yours in other states?
Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah.
We actually started on, we were inspired by we're CCDL, we were inspired by the VCDL down in Virginia, and that's the Virginia Citizens Defense League. They were sort of the cookie cutter platform of CDL organizations to start up on a statewide level. There are other organizations beside VCDL and CCDL that don't have that acronym for their name. But they were the ones that we based our organization on loosely. We're not directly affiliated with them. We're not accountable to each other. We each do our own thing. But when we wanted to start our organization, we looked to them, and we were given a little bit of guidance right from the beginning. And then it was, off you go. You're on your own. They shared their bylaws with us. They shared the structure of the organization with us, essentially, and then that was that. And we were on our own.
Do you think there should be people who are trained to carry in the schools?
Yes, I do. I'm a strong supporter of that. In fact, there's a news article today about Kent, Connecticut, how the school board there and the Board of Selectmen are trying to figure out whether or not they want their teachers to go through this free training course, 26-hour training course, to where the teachers can anonymously either carry a gun or not carry a gun, but they can go through the course, and the anonymity factor of it works really well, because it would be such that even though somebody does have a permit to carry and they are qualified to carry on the school grounds up there, nobody would necessarily know who it is. It could be one, two, it could be all of them, it could be. So it's an interesting thing, and I know Governor Malloy has spoken out against it today. He's not in favor. He doesn't think.
As he walks around with his armed guards.
He walks around with. Thank you. That's a very good point. He walks around with an armed security detail, and meanwhile, he overlooks the fact that had the school children in Sandy Hook had somebody, administrators, teachers, some last line of defense, last-ditch defense to protect themselves, the carnage that occurred there wouldn't have been that bad, and possibly may not have even happened at all.
I believe that 100%.
Right, because typically mass shootings occur in places that are gun-free zones, either prescribed by law or by the controller of whatever property chooses to prohibit it. So things might have gone a lot differently.
So I've been asking a bunch of questions, but there's got to be some stuff that you would like to get out there. Some stuff like some of the court cases that have gone down, like we mentioned in the beginning, Maryland.
Sure.
So go for it.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Dennis. Okay, well, today, first off, our organization has been suing the state of Connecticut since the so-called assault weapon ban passed back in 2013. It's known as Public Act 13-3 and 13-220, respectively. That was the amended language to accompany 13-3. Well, we filed a lawsuit with a number of other plaintiffs besides ourselves, with the help of the National Rifle Association, to challenge the assault weapon ban. We went through the federal district court, and it took a while to do that. Then we appealed to the Court of Appeals, the Second Circuit down in New York, and it took a while to get through the oral arguments there, and then it took some more time to get the decision there, and they upheld the law. Now we are running into our deadline, as of today was next Thursday, the 11th, to apply with appeal to the Supreme Court with a petition for writ of certiorari, which basically is the appeal. It is the language to seek the Supreme Court to review the decisions of the lower courts and either uphold it or overturn the law. And so what happened was we were getting ready to apply or appeal next week, and today a decision came out in a similar case in Maryland, Colby v. O'Malley. So what happened was there was a favorable decision. There's been decisions along with ours that failed at the circuit, at the Second Circuit, the Fourth Circuit, and the Seventh Circuit. I don't keep up with me. I know it's
How many
crazy.
circuits are there?
There's a lot of I think there's 12 circuits, if I'm not mistaken.
Almighty.
I know there's at least 9. That's a good question. I really need to know that before I spout out a number. But so what happened was a favorable decision finally came our way down in Maryland, and it leaves the door open for a split with circuits to where now the Supreme Court is more likely to feel compelled to take up one of these cases. We have a case, New York State has a case, and both of us are going to be appealing probably by next week, unless we get an extension based on the decision from today. So we will file our appeal, and we will hope that when it goes for review, that they actually take our case, because this has been a labor of intensity so beyond anything I understood I was signing on for when I became the president of this organization. We have to date paid close to $700,000 in legal fees.
Holy mackerel.
For a few different sets of lawyers at each level of the challenge. There's a lot of research work and documents filed and studies.
And what are you looking to gain to get rid of the ban on assault weapons?
Right. We want to essentially we would like the assault weapon ban that passed in 2013 overturned. It does not, in our view, withstand constitutional muster, as was ruled today down in Maryland. People are looking to blame guns and certain types of guns when these things that they're calling assault weapons are not even assault weapons. They're semi-automatic rifles, most of them. They should have never been banned because they fall under the scrutiny of common use. And what happened was the state of Connecticut, when they passed the law, they applied strict scrutiny. And what was ruled today was that under the Heller decision and the McDonald decisions in the Supreme Court, that intermediate scrutiny should have been applied in both of those cases, in our case and in New York's case, and also in Illinois.
So if it went well in Maryland, does that mean Connecticut has to abide by that decision?
No. What that means is, as of right now, the logical thinking or the legal thinking is that, well, Maryland can do whatever it wants to do, and that circuit can do whatever it wants to do. But under a constitutional challenge, if we go to the Supreme Court, we're looking for a decision to overturn our law here in the state of Connecticut. Essentially, it takes the Supreme Court to make something become the law of the land in that sense. So they can, there's a number of things they can do. They can pass on our case. They can take our case. They can pass on New York's case, or they can take New York's case. I know California is going to be appealing as well. It's quite an interesting thing. California has an assault weapon ban too. That's
really, but I can't imagine California appealing. I mean, most of the people that live there, well, anyways.
Listen, the desire to be free, the desire to be free human beings and exercise their rights is in all 57 states, as Barack Obama would say, we have 57 states. But this is a constitutional thing. We believe it's a human rights thing, It's a civil rights thing, and we are proud that we have stepped up and have been doing our due diligence to see this through at this point.
So you guys winning more than you're losing?
Well, this is really our only challenge so far,
Okay.
so we haven't really taken anything else to court. But we've done, we're looking at the session starting yesterday, the 2016 legislative session, and it's a short session. And already there's a couple of gun bills. You got a call?
Yeah, I think you do. Yep, hang
Oh.
on. Good evening, you're on Talk with Scott.
Hi, Dennis. How you doing?
Hey, how you doing? Can you speak up? I can barely hear you.
Yeah, I'll try to. Is that a little better?
That's a little. I don't know if Mary
All right,
Jane can
well,
do something.
I just a couple of questions to your guests
Okay.
in regard to assault weapons. Me as an everyday citizen, what do I need an assault weapon for? You know, if I'm going to go hunt deer, I think if I can't take him out with a semi-automatic, then maybe I want to start all over again. Secondly, I think when the Constitution was written and the right to bear arms, we were talking about black powder guns and a ball that you poked down in there and did your best to sort of aim with a semi, whatever your barrel happened to be, whether rifled or not, but you hope that you hit what you aimed at. So, I'm just wondering about this assault thing. Why do we need assault weapons?
Well, first off, it's not the Bill of Needs, it's the Bill of Rights, for starters. But let's take your second question first. You're talking about when the framers adopted our Constitution and the amendments, that they only had black powder guns, correct?
Yeah.
All right, now that's the Second Amendment. Now we also have First Amendment rights, correct?
Yes.
Okay, now you're exercising your First Amendment right now, correct?
Sure.
Okay, did
We
you
both
ride
are.
down here to the studio on a horse? And I'm not being funny with you, I'm just pointing out that you were able to pick up a modern instrument, a telephone, call a studio where people are using TVs that didn't exist either back in the framing of and the founding of our country and the framing of our Constitution. So essentially times change, and our founders and our framers knew this and they understood this. So what they attended, and if you look at the convention arguments when they were drafting the Bill of Rights, they had indicated in those arguments that they knew times were going to change and that weaponry was going to change, and that we basically needed to stay on par to be able to challenge a standing army within the borders of the United States. So now with that in mind, we wouldn't stand any kind of chance against a standing army with black powders and muskets. And I know a lot of people have a hard time quantifying that the intent of the Second Amendment was to actually fight off tyranny and not hunt deer, because it doesn't say anything in the Second Amendment about hunting deer.
Right, but wouldn't the three of us have been part of that standing army in those days?
Not necessarily. No, you could have been a simple colonist or a newly minted American once the Constitution was enacted, and you may have had a overzealous government take over a state, and therefore you could have been facing oppression and tyranny from whatever state you lived in. And the idea was to be able to people to be able to protect and defend themselves, and get together and overthrow a force that would impose tyranny on them. And you can't do that today in modern society with the black powder rifle.
What about his question? What about
What are you
his
saying?
question?
We got to go against the government?
No, I'm not saying we have to go against the government, but we need to protect themselves in case the government ever goes against us. If you look,
Wow.
you can laugh, but if you look what happened during the Third Reich in Germany. If you look in the 20th
Not the
century
Third
alone,
Reich.
you'll see over 100 million people were murdered by their own governments.
You know, it's not
Third
just the government either. I mean, one of the things that I think helps this country from being invaded is the fact that there's so many people that have guns. There's law-abiding citizens that have guns. So it would, that's what protects our country. That's one of the main things I think that protects our country.
But Dennis, assault weapons?
Well, look,
They're not even assault weapons.
Even if they were
assault
assault
weapons.
weapons.
They're semi-automatic firearms. real assault weapons have select fire configurations on the switch.
Sure.
Okay, so essentially the state of Connecticut took semi-automatic rifles, and because they look like assault weapons, they redefined them to be named assault weapons. In fact, prior to the law being passed in 2013, they were calling them assault weapons, and then they were called out on that by us and other organizations around the country repeatedly, who also had similar challenges as us. And when they finally had to admit that they were beaten, they changed their arguments to being assault-style weapons. Then, when the law passed, was rammed through under emergency certification, what they did was then they renamed and rebranded them assault weapons under the Act. So now by state statutes, they are defined as assault weapons. But there is no military in the world that uses semi-automatic firearms in any capacity as an assault weapon.
You know, I want to add something too here. You know, you talked about when they did the Second Amendment that they had black powder guns and stuff. But do you think, wait a minute, do you think it would have made a difference if they had the kind of guns then that we have now? Do you think they would have wrote it different? I don't think so.
It depends on who had those guns.
What?
It depends on who had those guns. If it was the British that had those guns, you and I, the three of us, wouldn't be probably.
Oh, I know that,
here.
but that's not, you're missing my point. My point is, when they wrote that, as Scott was saying, with what they had for weaponry and what they foresaw would become weaponry. Now, I'm saying to you, if at that time they had assault weapons, they had pistols that could hold 10 shots or whatever, do you think they would have wrote that Second Amendment differently?
Well, I think it was looked at differently.
Well, I don't know about that.
Okay, and that's fine. And I'm always happy to entertain these discussions or play arguments, if you will.
I'm not going to take up your night.
No, please, no. It's good for you to understand that at the time of the founding and the framing of this country in the Constitution, that they didn't put the right to keep and bear muskets. They put it the right to keep
and bear arms.
That's right, in general. And again, back to the earlier statements I was making, you would be amazed and astonished at the brutality that countries have put their own citizens under in the history of mankind.
I'm well aware. Yeah, I'm well aware. There's some bad things happening.
Oh yeah, sure. I mean, China during the Great Leap Forward, the best estimates are that up to 40 million people were murdered.
Don't compare us to Germany and don't compare us to China. This is the United States of America, and bottom line, if you don't like it, leave it. You know.
Yeah, but do you honestly think that something like that couldn't happen here?
You mean like Kent State?
No, I'm not talking about Kent State. I'm talking about, you don't think that there's a possibility that someone could try to overthrow our country? Even from within? You honestly don't believe that could happen?
I think that with the standing National Guard that we presently have, along with the armies of the United States, I don't think that somebody's going to get very far.
What if it's our own government?
Right.
You know, don't mention the National Guard because they talked the National Guard into killing people at Kent State. So you can't, you can't come across like the National Guard's going to say, "Oh no, we're not going to do that. We're going to protect the people," because that didn't happen.
It's a fail-safe. Nobody is implying that our government today, as it stands, would come and murder our own people. But things change, times change. What if there's a massive depression? What if there's starvation and hunger and the forces of tyranny come to our shores? Then what?
Or
really,
mass.
It's a fail-safe. It's a check, and it's worked very well.
Or you have people trying to come to your house and take what you got.
If things get that bad, I'll handle what I have. But like I say, do I need a 30 bullet clip? If it gets that bad, guys, I won't be sitting here watching you, and you won't be talking. We'll be shooting each other, trying to take what each other has.
Well, you're going to hope you're prepared.
I hope it doesn't get to that.
Great call.
I don't want to think that.
Yeah.
Great call. Great call.
Right,
listen, I'm always happy to have these discussions.
All righty. Thank you, guys.
All right, thanks.
No problem. I liked it.
Scott, we're down to 2 minutes, so I want you to take the last 2 minutes.
Sure.
But before you do, I want to thank you again for coming on my show.
Thank you for having me
Maybe
on.
we can do it again down the road.
Absolutely.
But go ahead. What's most important?
The landscape is always changing. So the legislative session opened up yesterday. And right now, the two things that we're looking at is a domestic violence bill, which essentially calls to seize firearms for people that have a temporary restraining order filed against them. And this is without any kind of hearing. So they're looking to do this. They introduced this bill last year, but they've changed some of the language to where people will be able to have their pistol permits reinstated in a timely fashion. But there are serious concerns we have with that, and we're going to be updating our membership accordingly as we dissect the language in that bill. We're seeking clarification on a number of the points. And they are also looking to lower the blood alcohol content, because right now it's at 0.10, and they're looking to bring it down in accordance with state statutes for driving impaired or driving under the influence at 0.08.
So you're telling me if you get arrested for drunken driving and it's at a certain level that they can take your guns away?
Well, right now the level to carry a gun is 0.10.
Oh, okay.
It's higher than driving under the influence. So we don't see that as a big issue completely. But again, we're seeking some clarification on these two new bills that were introduced just yesterday. So.
Well, so Obama, real quick, if we can get in, Obama made executive orders. Now, how does that affect? I mean.
He's not going to be able to answer that.
No? Okay. Well, sorry. Scott, thanks again.
Thank you.
And we'll have to do it again down the road.
All right. Thanks a
Right?
lot.
All right. Thank you.